All right, so welcome again. And we are having an event today that is really special. It's called On Love and Resilience. And you might think, what does a project on Roma people have to do with a broad topic like this? What we want to do at the Roma Peoples Project, and our mission is really to create new possibilities and uplifting stories for the Roma people, and to create events that connect the Roma with the broader society. We don't live isolated. Roma studies are not isolated. And by doing that, we foster connection. We understand stories in an environment that is safe and pleasant, even when you're part of a people that struggle so much. And there is so much trauma, transgenerational trauma, current, so many human rights violations. Sometimes proactively choosing to look at resilience, to look at what is good and what can get better, is an act of radical responsibility. And being happy could be an act of, could be connected with human rights, could be connected with what can we create new that can be possible. That being said, I want to jump right in the event. The structure is pretty simple. We'll have stories shared of love and resilience from three amazing women who are artists, writers, and activists at the beginning, and I will ask them to quickly introduce themselves in the interest of time. Cristina Bejan, Roxana Cazan, and Andreea Mottram. And then we'll have a song at the heart of our event by Lisa Weiss, a Roma musician and artist who is joining us from the Netherlands. And then I'm going to have a conversation for the second part of the event with Roma American writer Oksana Marafioti about her story through the lens of love and resilience and her work. I'm really excited to hear the stories. So Cristina.
Thank you so much, Christiana, for the invitation, and thank you, Roma Peoples Project, for all the amazing programming that you do, and also activism. So I'm just honored to be sharing the stage today, and I'm super excited because my story is about the greatest love of my life before I met my partner, and that is my grandmother. So um, to introduce myself, I'm based in Denver, and I'm a playwright, poet, and historian. I teach history. Um, and my grandmother is kind of the epitome of love and resilience in my life. And so I've written some notes. This is going to be more of a storytelling memory, 7 minutes. And she is actually, well, she's no longer with us. You'll hear that part of the story. But in my 30s, she was my best friend and roommate. So it's funny that I live in Denver now because my grandmother, this is my mom's mom, is actually from Colorado. She grew up on a farm, a very remote part of Colorado. There is nothing there still. Her father was Danish and her mother was Irish American. And the Irish American part meant that they were a target of the KKK. So there were interesting stories there. But she had a huge tragedy in her teenage years. Her appendix ruptured and she nearly died. And it was the nuns in Denver who nursed her back to health, which is why she became a devout Catholic. And that is important a little bit later. So she left Colorado for college right after World War II. This was her chance to see her country. She majored in math, and at the end of her freshman year, she took a weekend trip to New York City, so that's relevant to today, and met my grandfather in Grand Central Station. They had many adventures. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but they were in the professional tennis world. My grandfather managed Ilya Nastase and Jimmy Connors. They traveled all over the world with tennis. And funny how this girl who grew up on a Colorado farm ended up doing that. And she also helped start a charity that she was involved with her entire life. And when I was just 10, my grandfather died, and that meant that my grandmother was totally on her own. And she let nothing stop her. She was 100% independent. She was so involved with the charity, and she settled down in Rockville, Maryland, which is right outside DC. So now we're getting to where I come in this story. So we're fast forwarding it a lot of times. So in 2013, I got a job at the Holocaust Museum in DC. And so what became me just crashing with her turned into becoming full-time roommates and unofficial caretaker of my grandmother, which meant going to the grocery store multiple times a week, taking her to the doctor, the dentist, also being on the phone, making these appointments all the time, taking her to church every Sunday, because we're definitely not going to miss that. And also trips related to the charity to Los Angeles that she would plan herself, by the way. She would just pick up the phone and make those, book those flights. So memories of her, it was a totally open house all the time to all of my friends from DC. We had theater rehearsals in the house, in the backyard. We had the dress rehearsal of my most successful play to date, which is called District Land, which is a whole other story. But we had the dress rehearsal in her TV room to the audience of one, my grandmother on the couch in the grandma dent of the couch. It was fabulous and she loved it. Today is Valentine's Day. And for Valentine's Day, one of the three that we spent together, I gave her a stuffed bear and she named it Bachelor after her favorite TV show. Yeah. So she was really easygoing. I could talk to her about absolutely everything. And whenever I would get upset if somebody was being mean to me, she would say, well, that's their problem. And just say, you know, get over it. They're the ones with the problem. You have no problem. And a lot of these conversations took place with her sitting in her grandma dent on the couch and me sprawled out in the TV room watching NFL and NBA, because sports were on the entire time in that house. A funny memory. So I was very fortunate to get a scholarship to go to grad school, which is called the Rhodes Scholarship. And one of those years I was asked to host a Rhodes send-off dinner. And so I invited all of the new Rhodes Scholars and some of my older alumni friends over to grandma's house. And we sat outside and ate pizza and went around the table, and everybody, we asked them to share, and ourselves, what is your dream going off to grad school? Or if you're my age, have you achieved your dream after grad school? And we get around the table, ending on my grandmother, and she goes, I don't know what you guys are talking about. I left college to get married. So I love that story, because obviously my grandmother was onto something that's much more important than prestige, right? So we've arrived at the end of the story. Towards the end of these 3 years, my grandmother had a very steep decline, which of course was difficult. She had a stroke, and after that was very much a shell of herself. And I know many of us are familiar with when that happens. And shortly after died, and she did die in her marital bed, the bed that she shared with my grandfather, because this was the house that they moved to right before he died. And so that was her final wish. And the moral of this story is older generations are awesome. Let's not shut them away in nursing homes, away from society. Let's have adventures with them instead. And on that note, I am currently plotting my parents' move to Denver. So thank you.
Thank you for having me here. Thank you, Roma Peoples Project and Cristina, Lisa, Oksana, Cristina, and Andrea for joining me, or allowing me to join you actually for this event. I'm super excited to see my very good friend Dominica Vedulescu, who's also a co-editor with me, and who's also a writer, creative writer for Roma Rights, and also Xiaojing Huo, who's my beloved friend from grad school, who worked in Romania in an educational program with Roma children. Thank you for being here. I want to share with you today a few poems about love, about my greatest love in life. And I see Christiana, you're holding Lev. Every time I see Lev, I don't know. To me, he looks so much like Milan. I want to like kiss him all over. I also have a 1-year-old who's luckily still asleep. So these poems are about him. The first poem I'd like to share is called The Black Walnut Tree. And you'll hear a lot of references to Oklahoma, which is where I live. I forgot to introduce myself. I am a poet from Oklahoma, Roxana Cazan. And the poem references pregnancy nightmares. I don't know if those of you who had a pregnancy before experienced these nightmares, but I had quite a few before giving birth. We watched the black walnut trees wallow their faces in the muddy river, spring buds hanging into the branches, unaffected like younglings. And I don't tell you about the nightmare I had so early this morning, right before sunrise, when I lost my mind for a while, like a mother mourning sons, like a haled black walnut tree, defrocked of bud, blanket, and bird song. A hero is a black walnut tree in the heart of Oklahoma, scarred by poisoned penknives one too many times, struck by thunder like a terrible morning nightmare. When we kill a black walnut tree, we have killed them all, hushed forests into prairie, frayed our dear hearts. And how peaceful it is when you pull me in, drive my forehead onto your shoulder, and how peaceful and how happy we have been, and how this very day changes everything. Um, the next poem is a prayer poem that I wrote during the pandemic, and it's titled The New Mother's Prayer During the Pandemic. And it was in one of those moments where Milan was still, I think, about 3 months old. I was really, really anxious about SIDS as a new mom, and so I would watch over him and wake up at night and just like hear if he's breathing, and I was really, really anxious about that. So I wrote this poem. It starts with a motto from Psalm 139, and that reads, "For you informed my inward parts, you knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, my soul knows it very well." End of quote. I'm not really a religious person. I'm spiritual, so I don't know, but I really felt very deeply connected to divinity at this time. Lord, let me learn the tongue of motherhood, unwinding from within. Yank your sounds and call them cooing, fussing, flirting, begging for more milk. My breasts bare against all hours of the night, slowly unpacking its coal of darkness, the minutes trickling down as if they were drops from a leaky faucet. Sometimes their soothing white noise, and sometimes their drip of despair keep me anchored and present despite the exhaustion. Lord, let me learn this little body arching inside my arm's cradle, this mouth pouting, satisfied with a suck, these fingers learning to grasp what's theirs to reach, this shrill that echoes in the bedroom like the hammering of woodpeckers, this soft breath like the birthing of a spider's filament of silk, heavy yet floating on the air, the way a loose string strays from a harp's frame. Lord, I only know the rhythms of my own breath. I can only keep myself secure. I cannot gamble with a new life, this pandemic so tantalizing. So I ask that you give me more of that which you've created. Your work is indeed wonderful, and my heart knows it very well, that there's a language you let be. There's a song of songs you've written just for us. Hear me, please. I only want to be careful enough to listen. I only want us to be. And one last poem, and it's called You Look Like Your Mother. It's also about my son. And it was also created during this pandemic year, which was fearful, not only because of the tragedy of the pandemic, but also because we had a terrible election year in the United States, and we literally feared all sorts of things, including a war with Iran. My husband is from Iran originally, and you know, we couldn't really be quiet in our hearts. Son, you look like your mother. You look like me, the keeper of harpsichord silence, the barterer for language like an old babushka, smiling with golden fillings, the reluctant immigrant of a country that doesn't matter, strung thin by the old Carpathians, the yellow rims, their rickety durmasts, right there where you still matter. Yesterday, newspapers with fat lips told us that your father's people, men with black turbans and rough cheeks that tell the short history of forgetting to be kind to each other, have been trying to relearn to be happy with themselves since 1979, when someone somewhere messed up. Drone attacks, deployed missiles, and a bunch of casualties with severed limbs and torn hearts. Those peduncular selves, so enclaved by silences, so devoted to that which they cannot see, much to feel guilty about. If there is war tomorrow, your name shall carry the sour heave of ethnicity, the ancient ink of the Zagros, and that's how you'll be written in this city where everyone is a John Doe. But lucky you, your face looks like mine, a peaceful moon hung up in once upon a corner of the world nobody cares about, its smallness fractured by the distance. And in this family, we don't want any trouble. We don't stir the water, dragging out dirt. We shake our heads no and try to forget everything about our brothers. Thank you.
Hello. So two stories that are so hard to follow. I'm so honored to be around all of you and with these amazing women that are sharing their stories, you know, through poetry, through poems, through writing. And I wanted to tell Oksana that I ordered her book this week, and it should arrive any minute. I was hoping to have it here. And I hope my daughter will read it too, because I think you share two parts of identities, American and Roma. So my name is Andreea Mottram. I have done pretty much many things regarding activism. I wouldn't, you know, bore you with my work history, just that what I usually like to describe myself with is that I'm the mother of two sons with autism, and I'm the adoptive mother of a daughter who has Roma origins. She's from Romania. We now live in USA. And the fact that I have three special children makes me an activist for their rights and our rights. And what I also want to share is that I'm the co-founder of Archer, which is a brand new initiative, the American Romanian Coalition for Human and Equal Rights. And maybe you can check our Facebook as well. I don't have anything in writing, and I would either be very short or very long. So please, Cristina, interrupt me. Because there are two wonderful ladies who have to follow me, and for sure you want to listen to them. I talked to Cristina before this event, and she knows the story, as well, and she wanted me, if possible, to share this love resilience story. That though at the beginning I was asking her whether I should say something about the immigration resilience story that I'm sure many of you share as well. But there's another powerful story that actually it's not mine, it's my mother's and my daughter's one, and they're both here besides my husband and my sister. So I'm among family. um, and it's mostly their story, so I have their permission to tell this part of our adoptive family story. Cristina reminded me of my grandmother that I miss dearly, and my grandparents, and I can say that everything starts with them. The story is about how you start to love, regardless of the color of the skin, how you get interconnected with other identities, and how it becomes a story of love and resilience, but it can have some barriers, and mostly they are cultural. I grew up in a family, especially my mother's parents, who are in a way bipolar regarding how they would describe or interact with Roma population. They lived in a village close to a city in southern Romania, and they used to live very close, I mean, across the street from a Roma community. And besides the fact that my grandparents used to say, we'd always buy milk from the Roma family across the street because I know how clean they are and how hardworking they are, and we trust them, not other, let's say, Romanian family. And my grandmother used to be so witty and in the same time so helpful to the Roma children and the Roma families, helping them with food, money, and a good word. In the same time, I grew up in a family that would have prejudices about Roma. I could hear stories like, don't go alone as a child because the thieves might steal you, and so on. It was this ambivalent, you know, part of the story that you hear as a child growing up in Romania. And my mother had the same, let's say, ambivalent conception about them. And at the beginning, we have to admit, she, besides being reluctant to me and my husband at the time adopting a child, she was reluctant to the fact that many of the adoptive children in Romania, mostly at that time, 80% of them had Roma origins. And my mom was living with us, so it was pretty hard. I talked to her this week and I asked her if I can tell this story, and she said, why not? And because that's actually the truth. And we are talking about that, and about the fact that I wanted to adopt a child before knowing my daughter, before having the social services department telling us they found a child. And speaking of love, the thing that she told me she might not be able to do was to love a child that didn't have her own blood. That's pretty much what she told me. And I have a biological son, and at that time he was, I think, 2-3 years old. And I thought about it, and I said, you can definitely not love somebody by anybody forcing you to do that. Love doesn't come like that, I said. But just think about it, Mom. That child might be the first grandchild that will tell you, I love you. And I don't, and it's mostly a self-fulfilling prophecy, because at that time my son was nonverbal, and he's still nonverbal. In the meantime, he learned how to say I love you, but he couldn't say it at the time. Actually, after adopting Bella, all my family learned how to say I love you, because she was the one. I don't know how much you know about the Romanian culture, but it's very hard for us to say I love you. And I love you comes very hard in Romanian families. I mean, it's at the opposite level of I love you here in the States. But she was the one, when we adopted her and when she started talking, that those were some of her first words, telling us, I love you each day. And another thing that helped my mom change definitely was just by visiting this child that we found that we can adopt, visiting together with her and with my biological son. And I lie you not, but the moment we stepped foot on that with my mom in the foster family's house, Bella's eyes, she has like big hazel eyes, were just watching my mother. She was following her, being curious. She was mostly nonverbal at the time. She was only 2.5. And my mom's first reaction was, I think we'll just get along great, the two of us. And another thing that my mom shares, speaking of love, is that by visiting that foster family, she learned another great lesson about love. There are many stories which are true about abusive foster families, of very sad stories that foster children are going through, but this was not my daughter's story. She was surrounded with a lot of love and care. That was an amazing foster family, and that's something that we also learn from them, the love and the care that you can surround a child regardless of their skin color, of their history, of anything. So it's not mostly my story, and I'm thankful that my daughter and my mother let me share this, and maybe one day they will use their own voice and tell their own story. And thank you for this opportunity.
So in interest of time, Lisa, I know you have a song prepared for us. And after that, we'll have a conversation with Oksana. Thank you for joining us from the Netherlands.
I wrote a song about the road. It's always about the road. In my little friendly town near the German border, home alone, and I'm thinking of you. I see silent movie playing in slow motion. How the song rose over you with a lively rhythm and vibrant color. And the free may be themselves with you. They can discover their identity on their journey. If they leave their land and home. Oh, my road, my lovely road of art. You've been always so safe and welcoming for the travelers, they come and go. Oh, not all spirits are broken. If they're no soul. Oh, my rose of love. A million of miles we have gone to be free. A million of tears we have cried for we see on our road of love. Oh life, oh love, oh road, la luce, adieu. Goodbye. Oh life, oh love, oh road, la luce, adieu. I come back again, I hope. Oh my love, my road of love, 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 love.
Wow. I could not stop but think throughout your whole performance and the story shared by our previous speakers that is absolutely amazing we are doing this on Zoom. There's so many emotions and
It's the first
so
time I
much
did it on Zoom.
thought that is shared here. So beautiful and so touching. And now it's my pleasure to also invite to be with us Oksana Marafioti, who is one of the most prominent Roma writer and artist. And she's teaching a Roma class this semester as well. And we have so much to learn from. As I mentioned before, it's the first time Roma Peoples Project collaborates with Oksana, and we really hope to have you part of the Roma Peoples Project community from now on, and continue the conversation.
Yes, thank you so much for having me here. And happy Valentines and Galentines and Fellowtines Day, you know, all of the love days that we have out there. This is a really hard act to follow. I mean, all of the beautiful souls that came before me. Um, but so how do I introduce myself? I am an Armenian Greek Roma. I'm an immigrant in America. And of course, now I speak and write in English. So I've adopted this country, as so many of us do. And I do a lot of public speaking on various Romani related issues. I travel around the world. This semester at my university, I'm coming to you from Nevada, Las Vegas. I'm teaching Introduction to Romani Culture class, which is probably the most incredible class I've ever taught. I mean, I'm not kidding. It is very different from anything, and I think my students would say the same, judging by their reactions. I write a lot about life stories, but the older I get, the more I realize that I'm very, very much connected to writing Romani stories simply because we don't have the voice. So many people out there do, and I have the opportunity to do it. So I feel like it's a responsibility, but it's also, for me, a great love affair with my own culture.
Such a wonderful way to express it. And I remember when I decided to work on Roma issues, I had the shared sense of responsibility because there is not much known about our culture. and there's so much richness and so much beauty in it that needs to be spotlight and shared, and to be more and more visible in the mainstream. I know you shared this in your book, and I hope I know some of our participants read your book, and I hope um, the ones who didn't, they will find your work, as well as the work of all of our speakers before, as I know Cristina and Roxana are very, they write a lot as well, a lot of stories. But I would like to know a little bit about your childhood through the lens of love and resilience. If there are a particular story you would like to share that you might have already shared in your writing, or it's a new story that you have, might not. Um, I would love to hear that.
So I came across this kind of by accident. I started posting. First of all, I come from a stage family. I grew up in former Soviet Union. My grandparents were on stage since they were young. My parents were on stage. They never had any other jobs in their lives. So I grew up touring, not in caravans, but in tour buses. People ask us that, well, oh, you're Roma, so you were touring in the caravan. No, we were touring just like any rock star. And
I would remember that. That's actually a beautiful line. Roma touring like every rock star. It's just amazing. I just want
well,
to
you need to break down those stereotypes somehow, right? So do it by example, right? You know, write what you know, say what you know, right? And I started posting these old pictures. I have a photo album of my, stage family on, pretty much every picture is on stage. And I started posting these on my Instagram so that I wouldn't lose the photos because some of them are fading. And, on Instagram, you have to write a little story, right? Under the picture. Like, well, I feel like you do because I'm a writer. And I started writing about love. Almost every picture that I post, and it's not romantic love, of course, but I love the fact that everybody brought up non-romantic love in this room. And this idea we find in ancient Greek philosophy of different types of loves comes to mind. I'm not sure if everyone's familiar. And so my love, I don't even know if there is such a thing as love for stage, but I guess it was love for family who was on stage. Big extended family who were brave in the face of a lot of difficulty. Coming out as a Romani artist is not easy. It comes with its list of biases and stereotypes you come against, right? So you have to have a pretty thick skin. And there's my family on stage doing this magic, right? And I remember sitting backstage in the wings, listening to performances and being head over heels for that feeling. And of course, I didn't know what it was yet as a child. I just felt like it was pure magic. And so I think my first real connection to love also came by way of grandparents and parents and cousins and uncles and aunts who were doing the most magnificent things on stage. And it instilled in me the sense of universal love, because I also witnessed the audience, people crying in the seats because they listened to a song. And as a child, again, maybe I didn't know how to verbalize it or even understand it. Now, in retrospect, when I think about it, I recognize that I saw that connection, right, between the performer and the audience member. And it reminds me every day how connected we truly are. We just seem to forget and try to make divisions that are not really there. Long answer, sorry.
It's a beautiful answer. And I just love to hear just this concept of love for stage, because I just had this concept brought to life about what you shared, and all the stories that the stage can hold, and all the emotions and all the people that come there, and then all the joy I can create, and all the awareness. So it's so nice and so beautiful to hear the story. thank you for the answer. To be on the same theme of love and resilience, I wonder if you can share with us a little bit about your current or maybe your class or other writings through the same lens of love and resilience. Would like to know more about that.
Well, I could focus a little bit on writing just simply because I'm so involved in that particular aspect of my creative expression. I was, for a long time as a young adult, I tried to stay away from any kind of ethnic narratives that I was part of. Because, you know, I came to United States when I was 15. I wanted to be an American, whatever that means, right? I didn't know what that meant back then. I just had this idea from Hollywood movies of the true American being very individualistic personality. And so I kind of was striving for that, which meant that I could not accept, or I didn't really want to think about where I came from. You know, the Roma thing was forgotten when my parents divorced also. And not forgotten, but it was kind of like not talked about, right? So you don't talk about these, you know, these parts of your culture or your ethnicity. So for a long time, that kind of took the back seat, me, myself, as part of a particular ethnicity or culture. And it wasn't until I started writing the memoir in particular that I started to suddenly relive the childhood that I was writing about. And the culture came to life to me again. So when I write now, I feel like this is a way for me to get to know myself, truly who I am. And I don't know if it's true, if any of you who write feel that, but when I write, I have to dig deep. It cannot be on the surface. I am in love with storytelling, right? But also through the process of writing, I get to know who I am. And of course, this concept of self-love is talked about a lot right now, but it is something that we all at the core need, right? We need to love ourselves and who we are and where we come from. All the ugly bits, all the beautiful things, we need to love all of that in order to be as expressive as we can be, especially as artists, you know? And I feel the more artists I meet, and I have met many, many more this year during the pandemic than ever before, simply because this, you know, you just connect so much faster and people are more willing to talk because, well, this is it, right? But meeting all of these artists, I realized that we all, we create because we want to connect to some parts of our innocent selves that we left somewhere behind a very long time ago. Because that creative energy that we share as artists, it is an energy of birth. It's the same energy that that goes through you when you do have children, right? Because children are the ones in possession of it. So as a writer, you know, I have to love what I do, and I have to be all right with loving what my writing shows about myself, even if it's not the best thing that I want to see at the moment. So in other words, it's complicated. My relationship status with my writing is complicated, but not in a bad way.
Honestly, the way I feel listening to you talk, I feel like I can transcribe some of the words and like make a poem out of it. It's so beautifully narrated. And as somebody who has a child right now, he's almost 1 year old, and do my writing myself and have Roma Peoples Project, I oftentimes jokingly, but not that jokingly, refer to Roma Peoples Project as my non-human child. And sometimes when I'm in the last phases of editing of an article, I refer to the process as like a labor, you know.
Yeah.
Just, and when I and the anguish that comes with that, and the feeling of bringing something new into the world. And I feel like this is a follow-up conversation for women writers to continue, because I think there are so many similarities between this process, because it's a process of creation.
That's true.
But
in that way, I think that it is universal too. I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
No.
The sound is a little bit off.
So thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. Since we have non-Roma speakers with us, a non-Roma audience and Roma audience, again, the same topic of love and resilience, I would love to hear your thoughts on cooperation between, Roma and non-Roma writers, but not only Roma and non-Roma in general. And of course, if you want to add also between Roma ourselves, absolutely. So I would love to hear your thoughts on this broad topic. It's a very broad topic.
It's broad, but it's also, it's necessary. There's no other way. I don't understand why people are having conversations about how to cooperate. We need to do that to survive. Animals have known this for millions of years. How have we not learned this yet? I'm very surprised about this. Of course, it's needless to say, we need each other. It doesn't matter what group you belong to. Every group is a construct anyway. We are human. We are made the same way. We experience the same emotions. We all have biases. I have not met a single Roma or non-Roma that doesn't carry a bias, including myself. So I don't quite understand what the issue is. Obviously I'm simplifying this here, but we need each other. And I think even though this year has been very painful for all of us, we understand, I think more people understand now how much we do need each other. There is no surviving without cooperation. If each person is on their own for themselves, we die as a species very quickly. And that's the truth of the matter, and this goes, again, it doesn't matter groups, genders, ages, none of that matters because we are at the core the same. We all started as children. That's the one thing that we all have in common, right? And the faster we understand this, and it's not a difficult thing, it's not a difficult process to appreciate differences. As children, again, we do this naturally. When you see children play on the playground, they are not thinking about differences. They only see similarities. So I think it's almost like a coming back to something that we've already known at some point. And unfortunately, as we get older, we learn some very bad habits. And so I feel like instead of always just teaching children how to be good, we need to apply these same concepts to ourselves as adults and look at each of us individually, me look at myself and see what can I do to bring more harmony into the world. Because again, we have a world that is suffering and has been suffering for a long time, but right now we are in it, right? We're all seeing it and many of us are feeling it. And we are even now fighting on some level in terms of who's right, who's wrong, how to do it better, how to, what to do, right? And we forget that we have a generation of young people who are looking up to us and they're learning from us. And we're teaching them the exact bad habits that we've been taught. Instead of moving the lens away from us, you can't change an adult. It's very difficult, right? Once your mind is already set. But instead of that, moving that lens toward the younger generation and keeping them in mind is important. And then cooperating with the idea that at some point we'll be gone, but somebody else will pick up and maybe we can do better by them. I don't know if that makes sense. I talk about this all the time with everyone who would listen.
It makes so much sense and resonates so deeply with me and the mission of the Roma Peoples Project. I think everything you said is, I see a way in which we can make that practical. And at the beginning, I was thinking maybe I'm just a dreamer to think about things this way. But right now I'm like, it's the only way. If you see how much destruction, how many toxic patterns, behaviors there are, that actually gives me more strength and determination to believe that the only way forward for us, humanity, Roma and Roma, cooperation between us, is to relearn this openness, genuine connection. like just for full disclosure, like when I was thinking about speakers, and when I think about speakers in general for my events, I don't only take into consideration their accomplishments and how amazing they are, I also take into consideration their openness to others, their kindness, their capacity to be inclusive, their capacity to be generous. Because I think they're such important skills. They're part of the whole package. And um, it's necessary. We are not
Absolutely.
isolated,
Yeah.
and we need to support each other. And I had this sense and feeling from uh, pretty much everyone who has joined our community. So this, I'm so excited to hear all of your thoughts. Um, you touch on this throughout your beautiful answers, but I wonder if you can share a little bit more on what does it mean for you to be Roma? And is this identity has changed over the years, the way you look at yourself as a Roma, and what what being Roma means to you? Just to tell you where I'm coming from this story, I was reading an article I wrote 10 years ago about my story. And although I'm there in some ways, there are also so many nuances and so many new ways in which I see myself as a Roma that I'm like, okay, that was also connected with me being in my 20s, me being, and also I think the awareness of us as a global identity, a global Roma identity is changing overall. And I think might change us as individuals as well and connecting with other Roma. So I'm curious to hear, what does it mean for you to be Roma?
That's a very good question. And it's obvious, it's a question that we're asked a lot. I'm co-editing right now a special issue for the critical Journal of Romani Studies for Central European University. And that's exactly the question at the heart of this issue. So we have scholars writing on it and creative writings, writing stories, trying to answer this question. What does it mean to be a Roma person, right? So before I started editing it, I asked people on just social media, just everybody, what does it mean for you to be who you are? And all of the answers were so random. For me to be Italian means my grandmother's dish. For me to be Irish, it means this, And so it seems like memories are identity is often connected to specific memories that we cherish. It also is worth remembering that identity is not static, right? Like you said, identity is always shifting and changing and evolving. So again, I'm laying down the ground for a very difficult question to answer. What does it mean to be Roma? I think it means that you are constantly trying to figure out what it means to be a Romani person. To some degree, because you're being asked this so often, right? It kind of makes it sound like you have to have a definite answer. However, it doesn't seem that anybody has a definite answer. And I think sociologists will agree, anthropologists will also agree, because of how fluid identity is, there's really not one set way that I can say, well, this is why I'm a Romani person because I have that in my blood. If we're going down like just to a specific thing, right? And those of us who have that in our blood, we're all Romani people, right? So, everybody would share that according to where they're from. But also I think as I'm studying Romani history more and teaching it more, I'm learning it too. I'm learning more about what it means because we've never had the luxury to be allowed to feel like we're united people. We've always been told that we're divided, and in many ways we are divided and have been, but now there's unity coming in, right? And this is why we're thinking about these questions. And I think that there's something with this concept of self-acceptance that I really, really appreciate and love about Romani people. And this is, again, based also on my experience, just growing up the way I grew up, looking at the hardships my family had to go through. And again, we were pretty well off, stage family. So I was lucky in that way, but there were so many different difficult things that they had to go through because they were Roma. And yet they never let it go. that was, it was never a question like, well, we should just like, you know what, forget about this. Let's just forget about this and never mention this again. And I know in many cultures, people were forced to do that, right? To forget your identity, your culture, because it's too dangerous. And of course, there are Romani people who have done that too. But generally, I think that especially when I look at younger generations right now, they possess the seeds to self-love that we all seek our entire lives. Doesn't matter if you're Romani or not, right? But it feels like in Romani culture, because there was such a heavy dose of oppression, right? And ostracization and all of that for centuries, people learned how to be okay being who they are, right? And in a way, this is a perfect lesson in how much the world is uncomfortable when you are all right with who you are, right? As Roma people, if you are being too much of a Romani person, you are going to be told, no, that's not what society is expecting you to do. And what I love is that, and I think that is part of our identity, is that we say, you know what, this is me, right? And so it's funny that in all of these self-help books we read today, right, and all these blogs and things, people say, be yourself, find your tribe, you know, get in touch with your inner self. And Romani people have been doing that and ostracized for doing that exact thing and still doing it. So I think that's part of my identity. I'm stubborn in that way too.
That's so inspiring and uplifting to hear about your journey and about you see yourself as a Roma. And I love what you said, that is not a static identity, and we don't need to have a fully defined concept. And it's a relief to hear that, because I'm also asked that question all the time. And I hear so much pride and so much comfort, and it's new, you know, especially for somebody like me who was assimilated, was forced to forget my Roma identity. And I worked so hard over so many years to regain it, to understand it, to reinterpret it, and to basically say, I am Roma like this. And that's not, you can be Roma in this way and I can be Roma in this way. And there is space for us to coexist and to have this broad, beautiful, nuanced way in which we can define ourselves, or we can have choices.